Would you allow a large political rally in New York in these circumstances, in this time?
No.
The president's going to, theoretically pack 19,000 people into an indoor arena. It doesn't seem like there's any social distancing. No one's required to wear a mask.
No.
Too often we're having a discussion in this nation about, are you supporting the law enforcement community or are you supporting communities of color? This is a false binary choice. It is not a binary choice.
8 years under President Obama, the Justice and Policing Act, none of it was taken up virtually.
No.
If we need to find somebody that needs to have their shoe shine, we need to just go right on over and shine their shoes.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. I am Brian Fisher, your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host. As always, Jeff Reed, Rob Gardner in the house. Good to have all of you with us today. We'll be opening up the phone lines at the end of the first segment. So get ready for that. We'll take phone calls for the rest of the program, kind of allow you to set the table for us. It's got to be something that's been in the news this past week. Give you the number as we get toward the end of this first segment. Just want to remind you that we have podcasts at afr.net. Never need to miss an edition of Focal Point. You can audio stream the program at afr.net. You can live stream the program, both audio and video, on our Focal Point Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. Want to email us? The email address is focalpoint@afa.net. And you just heard the spot. Coming up on Father's Day, you want to celebrate Father's Day by giving a father of a young son that you know, give him a gift that will help him equip his son for the journey to manhood. Think about picking up the Boy to Man book. You can get it today at afastore.net, afastore.net. Don't wait. You're thinking about it right now. You got a father in mind. Go ahead and order that book, afastore.net. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God as we begin the program today. We are in the book of Psalms, and we're reading a very significant psalm today, Psalm 31. This is David describing his experience with things that you and I have known. Some of you might be right where David was when he wrote this. You might be right where he was right now today. So this could be a psalm just for you. You know, he says in verse 4, he's praying to God, and he says, take me out of the net that they, referring to his enemies, to the people that hated him, the people that didn't like him very much. And he said, I'm in a net, and my adversaries have hidden this net for me. And sometimes that can be our experience. Sometimes we can get ambushed. We just don't see it coming. We never saw it coming. We find ourselves trapped, and it comes from a place that we least expected it. But David says in verse 7, you have seen my affliction. You have known the distress of my soul. So what David does is he affirms here that no matter how deep the pit that you and I are in, no matter how intense the agony and distress of our soul, in God, I have someone who knows exactly what that feels like, because in the person of Jesus, he has been there. David goes on, verse 9, he says to God, I am in distress. My eye is wasted from grief, my soul and my body also. Maybe you can identify with this. You can get to the place where you think you are all cried out. You have wept, and you have wept, and you have wept until it seems you have no more tears to give anymore. David says in verse 10, my life is spent with sorrow. like his best buddy, the one who goes with him everywhere he goes. His name's sorrow. I have spent my life with sorrow and my years with sighing. And so he says, sorrow, anxiety, depression seem like my closest friend. Everywhere you go, they're right there with you, right next to you. You can't shake them. You can't get rid of them. You find yourself walking down the hall. My years with sighing, David says, you find yourself walking down the hall, just letting out one deep sigh after another. Ever been in that place? You're just walking down the hall, just emitting these deep sighs, one after another. And you can even feel the sorrow, this distress in your physical body. David says in verse 10, my strength fails, my bones waste away. So you could be in a position where you just physically, you feel lousy all of the time. You never feel good. You never feel right as part of the distress that you're carrying with you. Now, some of it, David says, he says, I'll be honest with you, some of this is my own fault. For some of this, I don't have anybody to blame but myself. He says in verse 10, my strength fails because of my iniquity. So he recognized that some of this is simply God's discipline to mature him, to discipline him for his iniquity. It might not have anything to do with what he's experiencing, but there is iniquity there that God wants to bring to the surface, wants David to deal with, and this pain, this sorrow, distress is God's way of bringing it to the surface so David can deal with it. Now he says in verse 11, some of it is not just from me, some of it is from other people. You know, one of the worst things that we can experience in life is to be betrayed and to be abandoned by people that we thought were our friends. Am I right about that? He says this in verse 11, because of all my adversaries, I have become a reproach, especially to my neighbors, an object of dread to my acquaintances. He says, people I used to socialize with have pulled away from me. Those who see me in the street, he says, flee from me. People see me coming, they cross the street and go the other direction. It gets to the point where you think you have no friends left. You feel isolated. You feel alone. You feel abandoned. David says in verse 12, I have been forgotten like one who is dead, like I never existed. I have become like a broken vessel, empty and drained. So, and he says, I know that people are talking about me behind my back, and I know that what they're saying about me is not good. I hear the whispering of many as they scheme together against me. But in all of David's agony, in all of his distress, in all of his loneliness and abandonment, David knew where to turn and where to go. Let me read just some excerpt from Psalm 31. In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me. Incline your ear to me. Rescue me speedily. Be a rock of refuge for me, a strong fortress to save me. For you are my rock and my fortress, and for your name's sake you lead me and guide me. Into your hand, he says in verse 5, I commit my spirit. Where have we heard that before? That was Christ on the cross. He was uttering that because he was feeling like you may be feeling today. Abandoned, lonely, isolated, forgotten, rejected. That's how Jesus felt on the cross. Remember, everybody abandoned him. Everybody left him. They scattered to the wind. His disciples, the ones he's trained, admitted, and poured his life into, they cut and ran on him when the pressure was on. And so he says, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. David says in the end of verse 5, you have redeemed me, O Lord. You are a faithful God. And then you drop down to verse 14. David says, I trust in you, O Lord. You are my God. My times, this is a great expression, my times are in your hand. My times are in your hand. Please rescue me from the hand of my enemies and from my persecutors. So David understood that the safest place that you and I can be is in the palm of God's hand. He says, you will protect me, you will not crush me, you will redeem me. He says in verse 16, if I can grab it here, he said, verse 16, make your face shine on your servant, save me in your steadfast love. O Lord, let me not be put to shame, for I call upon you. Oh, how abundant, he says in verse 19, is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you. I might not be enjoying it right now, but it's being stored up for me. The day is going to come when it's all going to be mine. He says in verse 20, in the cover of your presence, you hide them from the plots of men. What God has stored up for you, the goodness that he has stored up for you, he's got it in a protected place. No man, no matter how evil, no matter how hateful, can get to that storehouse of God's goodness for you. David says, you store them in your shelter from the strife of tongues. So he says in verse 21, blessed be the Lord, for he has wondrously shown his steadfast love to me when I was in a besieged city. I said in my alarm, I am cut off from your sight, but you heard the voice of my pleas for mercy when I cried to you for help. Therefore, he says to us, and this is his word to you today, if you're where Jesus was on the cross, if you are alone, distressed, forsaken, abandoned, rejected, you feeling like David did in this psalm, here is his word for you today. Listen to this. Love the Lord, all you his saints. The Lord preserves the faithful, but abundantly repays the one who acts in pride. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord. So that is also my word for you today. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord. Well, let's take these items and let's take them to prayer together, if you'd be kind enough to join me. Sovereign Lord, I pray in the name of Jesus that me, my family, the listening audience of Focal Point, that every one of us will take refuge in you. And I pray in turn that you will never let us be put to shame. Please deliver us in your righteousness. I ask you to turn your ear to us and to come quickly to our rescue. Be our rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save us. Please lead us and guide us and free us from any trap that is set before us. I pray that we will commit our spirit into your hands and that you, as the Lord and as the God of truth, will redeem us. May we trust in you and be glad and rejoice in your love. Please see our affliction and know the anguish of our soul. I pray that you will not hand us over to the enemy, but instead that you will set our feet in a broad and spacious place. If we are today in any distress, if our eyes are weak with sorrow, and our body and soul with grief, I ask you to be merciful to us. Lord, there are times in our lives when we are consumed by anguish, and our strength fails because of our affliction. Our years may be consumed by groaning. Our bones may grow weak because of our enemies. I pray in those times that we will trust in you and say to you, you are my God. May our times be in your hands. Please deliver us from our enemies and from those who pursue us. Let your face shine on us as your servants. I ask you to save us in your unfailing love. I pray that you will store up goodness for us and bestow it on us in the sight of men. Please hide us in the shelter of your presence from the intrigues of men and keep us safe in your dwelling from accusing tongues. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. You know, Anthony Fauci out there, nobody's paying any attention to him anymore. He is the most ignored man in all of America. You have not seen him with President Trump in weeks. Number to call, by the way, if you want to join the program on Free for All Friday, is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. Operators are standing by. When the call screener takes your call, remember your first name, city and state, and then a brief description of what you want to talk about and what you want to say. Make it brief, because I don't want you to talk to our call screener. I want you to talk to me and to our listening audience. So keep it brief so we can get as many phone calls online as possible. You know, Anthony Fauci, poor guy, he's out there saying, we got to cancel the NFL football season. It's the only way you can get people to listen to him. Dr. Doom. That's my new nickname for Dr. Anthony Fauci is Dr. Doom. We're doomed. The sky is falling. There is no hope. That's Dr. Anthony Fauci. He said yesterday that Americans, quote, don't believe science and they don't believe authority. No, Dr. Fauci, we don't believe you. Here is clip number 2, Anthony Fauci.
When people were saying, you don't really need to wear a mask. Well, the reason for that is that we were concerned, the public health community, and many people were saying this, were concerned that it was at a time when personal protective equipment, including the N95 masks and the surgical masks, were in very short supply. And we wanted to make sure that the people, namely the healthcare workers, who were brave enough to put themselves in harm's way to take care of people who were infected with the coronavirus and the danger of them getting infected, we did not want them to be without the equipment that they needed. So there was not enthusiasm about going out and everybody buying a mask or getting a mask. We were afraid that that would deter away from the people who really needed it.
So, Doctor, what is Dr. Fauci doing here? He's admitting to us, he's saying to us, I lied to you. I lied to you about the whole mask thing. I told you you didn't need to wear them, that there was no risk if you didn't wear a mask. I was lying to you because I didn't want you to be wearing a mask. You're not important enough. We wanted our healthcare workers to wear a mask. You know, and this is so thin because everybody in America would be happy to understand that. They would understand that. If Dr. Fauci came out, instead of lying through his teeth to us, he just said, look, we need to preserve the N95 masks for our healthcare workers, for the people that need them. American people would understand that. But no, he lied to us. So the question is, how can we ever trust a single thing he says the rest of his life? You know, once you tell a lie, you break trust with your audience. Why are they ever going to trust you a single time again? So Dr. Fauci is now beginning to understand why nobody is paying any attention to him at all. All right, Gretchen Whitmer, here's a quick one before we go to the phones. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Give your first name, city and state, and what you want to talk about. 888-589-8840. You know, the one piece of good news I have for you today is Gretchen Whitmer is not going to be our next president. She really wanted to be Joe Biden's vice presidential candidate, and we all agree whoever his vice presidential candidate is going to wind up being president of the United States in short order. There's no way that Joe Biden is going the distance. Everybody understands that. So there's this fierce competition to become his vice president because that's the path to the presidency. Stacey Abrams in Georgia has absolutely zero credentials to occupy the White House. I mean none. You could not find a less qualified woman in the United States of America. If you searched all 330 million people, you couldn't find anybody less qualified than she is, but she is angling for this job big time. Yep.
Hey, Brian, you remember it wasn't that long ago that the left was using or proposing the 25th Amendment a lot?
Yeah.
And that pretty much has disappeared. That talk has disappeared since Biden has arrived on the scene.
Right,
Have
yeah.
you noticed that?
Yeah, because if anybody might merit the use of the 25th Amendment, it could be Joe Biden, because he's in obvious cognitive decline. Everybody sees it. Even people in his own camp see it. You know, and Donald Trump is going to have a rally tonight in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or I guess it's tomorrow night. But anyway, it's going to be thunderous. It's going to be cacophonous in there. People have so much pent-up energy that it's going to be crazy town in there. Joe Biden cannot draw flies to a picnic if he laid out New York strip steak on the table. Couldn't do it. You know, he just has nobody showing up at his stuff. And that's why the Democrats have tried so hard to keep this thing from even happening. Jeff?
Yeah, I agree. I think it scares them to death that for people to see his popularity again. So far, they've had him under a basket, more or less. And did you see? I think the mayor there has issued a curfew now. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
those people that line up and camp out, they can't do that anymore. So they're trying to whatever they can to disrupt this.
And it's been absolutely peaceful. These are peaceful campers. They just want to be able to be at a rally and listen to Donald Trump. That's all they want to do. They're not out to trash anything. They're not out to pillage anything. They're not out to loot anything. They're just there to enjoy a political rally. Now, poor Gretchen Whitmer, she's rapidly losing any claim she would have to be the next president of the United States by hanging on to Joe Biden's coattails. She was trying to do her woman of the people thing yesterday. She was at a Detroit restaurant for a photo op, and she's serving coney dogs. And this guy walks into the restaurant, knows who she is, and he says, I'm a laid-off healthcare worker, and I haven't received any of my benefits yet. The unemployment benefits that you promised me, I haven't seen any of them. He says, is there any possible way you could put my name in? And she said, I'll check on it. Can I buy you a hot dog? Woman of the people. And, you know, it's like he's thinking, I don't want a hot dog from you, lady. I want the money that you promised me. So that's in the Gretchen Whitmer's world. By the way, remember, she's the one that went to the mattresses to try to keep that 77-year-old barber from cutting hair and supporting himself and his family. Well, she's finally given up. Her administration was trying to take away his operating license, and they finally gave it back to him. They've given up. Score one for the barber. Barber won. Gretchen Whitmer, a big, fat 0. You know, in Massachusetts, they're still playing hardball there. Officials have cut off the power and water to a gym that defied their reopening plan. And they admit it. Electricity and domestic water service were shut off at Prime Fitness and Nutrition. The judge granted the town the ability to shut down the gym. That'll teach them. That'll show them right there, right now. All right. Well, let's grab some calls to start today. Let's go to Donna in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, the site of the great 1888 flood. Donna, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian.
Hey.
I was wondering, since they're tearing down symbols of racist history, one of the biggest symbols they might find it actually constructive to tear down is the Democrat Party. It was Southern Democrats who fought the Union Army and hated Lincoln for freeing the slaves. The KKK originated from the Democrat Party. And it might be a good idea to tear down all symbols of the DNC and defund the House Speaker along with the House and Senate Democrats. And since it was the Republicans and a Republican president who freed the slaves, why are not we holding out this golden nugget of history? Voting for the Democrats is going backward.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's interesting, even the Democrats themselves, they won't admit it, but the Democrats themselves realize that the Democrat Party is the heart and soul of racism. Nancy Pelosi recognizes that the Democrat Party is the heart and soul of racism. She is now on a rampage, a politically genocidal rampage, to remove the portraits of every Democrat Speaker of the House whose roots go back to the Confederacy. So there's 11 portraits she wants to take down. There's 11 statues that she wants to be removed from the Capitol building. They are all statues of Democrats. So Nancy Pelosi is out to get rid of every trace of any Democrats who had a statue made in their honor or whose portrait hangs in the Capitol building. In other words, they know it, and they're trying to erase not American history, they are trying to erase their own history. That's what this is about, ladies and gentlemen. They're erasing American history because they are trying to erase their own history. That's what's going on with the Democrat Party today. All right, good call, Donna. Appreciate that. Let's go to Mary in Kimball, Texas. Mary, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
My name is Mary. I heard I was going to comment that on the demonstrators who destroyed and, property, that the mayors and governors of each state should be held responsible. Civil lawsuits filed against them for allowing it, for telling police to stand down and not calling the National Guard. They're using taxpayer money to fund our police department and our military, and yet they're not going to protect half the society. And my other comment was on Dr. Fauci, your talk. The scripture came to my mind with him. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, and why America wants to listen to what he has to say. Everyone on a cruise ship shall file a class action lawsuit. He told it was okay to take a cruise in January. And look at the many thousand people who got coronavirus on a cruise ship.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right. Mary, listen, I appreciate your call. And you've got a valid point about the legal ramifications of the mayors and governors allowing the looting and pillaging and destruction of private property. Somebody should be held accountable for that, and the people that should be held accountable for that are the rioters and the looters and the pillagers and anybody who allowed them to do it when they had a legal responsibility to stop them. And that would be the mayors and the governors of these cities and states. So instead of intervening with a police presence to arrest the looters, arrest the pillagers, and lock them up, and insist that they make restitution for the destruction and the damage, they just let them do it. And so I think she's exactly right. I think Mary is exactly right. They should be held accountable. And if you're going to spend taxpayer dollars on looting and pillaging, well, I think the governors ought to make good for that out of their own pockets. They're the ones that permitted it. They had the power to stop it. They had police departments at their command. They had the National Guard in their own state at their command. They are the commanders of the National Guard until the president federalizes them, and they didn't do anything. And in some places, they disarmed the National Guard before they sent them in to these places. They're tearing down these statues. They tore down a statue of George Washington in Portland last night, draped the American flag over his head and set it on fire. They're tearing down statues of Columbus all over the country, throwing them into rivers and throwing them into lakes. So the statues are being pulled down. Some places, they're tearing down statues of President Andrew Jackson. Which raises the question, should Jesse Jackson be expected to change his name? He apparently was named after a president of the South who was responsible for protecting slavery, who was responsible for the Trail of Tears from the Cherokee ancestors, Cherokee Indians, who, by the way, I have some Cherokee, so in some ways they were my ancestors, and he put my ancestors, if you're going to put it, he put my ancestors on the Trail of Tears. Maybe Jesse Jackson is the one that ought to think about changing his name. Now, speaking of these rallies, we have this one in Tulsa tonight. I think the mayor's also declared some kind of civil emergency or whatever. There's no emergency that I see. Maybe he's trying to be proactive. And there is some possibility that out-of-state groups will come into Tulsa to try to disrupt this thing in the name of social justice. Now, here is Andrew Cuomo, clip number one. Now, remember, Andrew Cuomo was a guy that allowed these looters and rioters and pillagers to run, to ransack the city of New York, and didn't lift a finger, didn't raise a peep of protest to try to stop them. There was no social distancing. A lot of them weren't wearing masks. They were going into stores in groups of 5 and 6 and 8 together, and 10 and 15 and 20, even though the governor had outlawed any meetings of more than 10 people. So the natural question is, how about a Trump rally in New York City? What do you think Anderson Cooper says to Governor Cuomo? What about that, Andrew Cuomo? Clip one.
We're seeing this now, this rally this weekend in Oklahoma. The president's going to, theoretically pack 19,000 people into an indoor arena. It doesn't seem like there's any social distancing. No one's required to wear a mask, though they'll probably hand them out. Would you allow a large political rally in New York in these circumstances, in this time?
No.
3 times. When you deny something 3 times, man, you are on record. Remember Peter denied the Lord 3 times. Can't walk away from that. So Governor Cuomo, riots are fine. Destroying private property, that's fine. Resisting arrest, that's fine. A political rally, that's a horse of a different color. Not going to permit it. Going to lock you up. Focal Point American Family Radio. Stick with us. We'll be right back with more of your calls.
WORD.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Let's grab a quick phone call to start this last segment. Let's go to Nan in Huntsville, Alabama. Nan, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Can you tell me why John Bolton's book is so controversial when I just don't understand anything about it at all?
Okay. Well, the problem with John Bolton's book, a lot of people write books after they leave the administration, and that's fine. But the problem with John Bolton's book, Nan, is there's a lot of classified information in there that he is releasing to the public. And it is a statutory requirement, it's a law, that every former member of an administration who writes a book has got to have that book vetted for classified information. In other words, if he divulges something that took place in a private conversation between him and the president, that by definition is classified information. So it has to be cleared before it can be released publicly, so that confidential information that's important for the business of the United States is not compromised. John Bolton would not do that. John Bolton wants to make the mother of all paydays here. That's why he didn't participate. Some of the stuff he knew, even back when they were doing the impeachment thing, refused to testify. Why? He wanted to keep his powder dry. He wasn't interested in impeaching and removing President Trump. He was interested in making an entire boatload of money. So he waited, saved all up his ammo, dumped it all in this book, and then refused repeated directives to get this screened and vetted by intelligence agencies first. So that is the short answer to your question. All right, let's grab a call from Jeanette in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Hey.
Go ahead.
Hey, Brian, I know I don't have much time. Love you so much.
Thank you.
Look, they're going to take all the statues down. So what they're going to put up, I'm mixed so I can say this, what they're going to put up, black statues of unworthy people. What you need to put up is that Terrence Floyd, if you're going to put a statue up, and quick. The Democrats are so evil. Malcolm X spoke about these people a long time ago. I didn't understand it. But that may be what got him killed. I thought Muhammad did, but he spoke against how the liberals have the black people, like, in control. They're deceitful. They're lying to them. And what else I have to say? Can we put the black in the American flag? Don't change the flag. Just put the black in there so the black side of my family can look up to the flag. Please. Love you, Brian.
All right. Thank you, Jeanette. I appreciate that. And, you know, we do put statues up because the people that we memorialize in a statue had qualities of heroism or bravery or courage that we admire, and we uphold them as role models to the rest of the country. Now, Martin Luther had a lot of problems. He was a serial adulterer. Everybody knows that. But he did a powerful thing when he demonstrated for racial equality peacefully. He was resolutely nonviolent. That's what made him different than Malcolm X. That's why we don't put statues up of Malcolm X, because he wanted to carry out his agenda through violence by eliminating people of a different race. Martin Luther King Jr. did not want to do that. He wanted to demonstrate against things that were obviously and radically wrong. We shouldn't send people to the back of a bus because of the color of their skin, but he did it nonviolently. He did it peacefully, and that took tremendous courage. Because remember, the people that he was leading in these marches and demonstrations, they had police dogs sicked on them. They had fire hoses turned on them. And Martin Luther King Jr. said, we are not going to strike back. This is going to be a peaceful demonstration. And he accomplished a lot, and because of that, we honor him. So that's what we need to do, is find people that we can honor and put black statues of them up. You know, it's interesting, this Juneteenth thing yesterday, that was the anniversary when the slaves in Texas found out that Abraham Lincoln had freed the slaves, that the Emancipation Proclamation had been issued. It took a while for it to get to the slaves in Texas. They found on Juneteenth, June 19th. So that really, that is a celebration of the emancipation of the slaves. It's also a celebration of the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln. And yet you have a concerted effort now to take down statues of Abraham Lincoln. One of them is in Boston. They want to get rid of it because it has Abraham Lincoln standing there with a freed slave with the chains falling off his wrists, kneeling in Abraham Lincoln's presence. And they want to get rid of that. I guess today is Juneteenth. Yeah, today is June 19th. Today is Juneteenth. The statue in Boston is a replica of a statue. I don't know where the original is, but it's a replica of a statue that was funded by emancipated black slaves. They were so grateful for their freedom. They were so grateful to the one who had freed them from slavery that they donated money out of their own pocket to get that statue erected. And now people want to tear it down. A statue that was funded with the generous donations of slaves who appreciated their freedom. All right. Let's see if we got a problem with our call screener. I guess it looks like I lost them all. I don't know what happened there.
They're still there.
Are they? I don't have anything on my screen.
Okay, the next one is Don from Springdale, Arizona.
Arkansas. Don, Springdale, Arkansas. Go ahead, you're on. What's on your mind?
Okay, Springdale, Arkansas.
Yes, sir.
2 questions. What is white privilege, and why aren't the Japanese rioting over the concentration camps during World War II?
Yeah. Well, I guess you'd have to ask them. They certainly had a rough go of it in World War II. That was done, by the way, by a Democrat. Who was the one that locked up the Japanese in internment camps? It was a Democrat that did that. We had a caller earlier talking about the link between the Democratic Party and racism. They were the party that went to war to maintain slavery. After they lost the war, they fought the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment that abolished slavery, that gave slaves every civil rights that whites had, and that gave them the vote. That was the Democratic Party did that. They were the ones that started the KKK. They were the ones that were responsible for all the Jim Crow laws. They were the ones that were responsible for segregation. And they're trying to bring it back, by the way. In Seattle, they've got a Juneteenth celebration today in Seattle, but the only people that will be permitted to join them in that celebration are black people. Whites are excluded. Ladies and gentlemen, segregation is back with a vengeance, being pushed by the Democratic Party and by Antifa. And also the Democrat Party, by the way, they were the ones that fought the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They filibustered that thing for days on end to try to keep it from getting to a vote. They opposed it in 1965, the Voting Rights Act. Republicans, a greater percentage of Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 than Democrats. All right. Again, I still got some problems with my call screener software. Don't know where it went. Jeff, you got a caller for me?
Yeah. How about Pam from Pinehurst, Texas?
Pam, Pinehurst, Texas. You're on with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi. I wanted to start out real quickly by going back to the pandemic. And just a thought that I had. I was really caught off guard with how easily we were led and how quickly we were all led to stay in our homes, wear our masks. It seemed to happen so quickly. I was wondering, it made me wonder if it wasn't a foreshadowing of the end of time when we're all going to be so easily, those that are left are going to be so easily led by the Antichrist. But on the subject that we were talking about, that you're currently talking about, there was, I live outside of Houston, there's a 25-year police officer who was fired here because he posted on his personal Facebook page basically he was saying, he said to the black race, he said, we are not out to get you. Police officers are not out to get you. The problems, a lot of the problems are within your race. It's something you need to look inward to resolve. It was a very nice post. Well, he was fired for that. The very next night, I saw a gentleman on Fox News by the name of Dr. Shelby Steele. He's a fellow at Stanford Hoover Institute. He's a black man. He said basically the exact same thing. And of course, not only was it was not criticized, he was actually, honored. And what a wonderful thought, and what a wonderful philosophy, and all this. So what I'm trying to say is, we're never going to solve the race problem until white people can speak their opinions as well without being called a racist. We've been programmed for so many decades now that if we have an opinion, if we have a thought, if we even say the word race, we are a racist.
Yeah, well, that's a good observation, and thank you for your call. I appreciate that. And I think this whole thing with the coronavirus and the way people followed Anthony Fauci, who did not know what he was talking about ever. That guy was wrong every time he opened his mouth. He was wrong, and yet we allowed him to lead our entire nation into this lockdown, locked up in our own homes because of that guy, who clearly still today does not know what he is talking about. But it shows you how easily people can be led. And so the Antichrist, I don't believe, is going to have nearly as much of a problem getting everybody in the world to follow him as maybe we think. This is an interesting thing here. The Aunt Jemima logo is being changed on the syrup bottles. You know who's upset with that? Aunt Jemima's great-grandson is upset with that. Here's a piece on Breitbart. A great-grandson of Aunt Jemima, the woman who provided the model for Aunt Jemima, says that his family legacy will be erased now that Quaker Foods plans to eliminate the Aunt Jemima brand of pancake mix and syrup. This is an injustice, he said, for me and for my family. This is a part of my history. He said Quaker Foods' answer to current events is to erase my great-grandmother's history. This guy, his name is Larnell Evans. He's 66 years old. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He's the great-grandson of Anna Short Harrington, who portrayed Aunt Jemima after the death of Nancy Green, the first Aunt Jemima, who made her debut at the Chicago's World Fair in 1893. Harrington, the original Aunt Jemima, was born on a South Carolina plantation where her family worked as sharecroppers. She was later discovered in 1935 by a Quaker Oats representative at the New York State Fair while she was serving pancakes. So they made her the icon for Aunt Jemima pancake mix and pancake syrup. She became a national celebrity, and her family now resents the fact that their family history is being erased. They weren't asked about it. They weren't consulted about it. Here, speaking of Shelby Steele, black scholars taking a different approach than Antifa, here is the dean of African Christian University. His name is Dr. Vadi Bakum. He's the dean of theology at African Christian University. He's a former pastor from California. He grew up in a drug-infested, gang-infested South Central Los Angeles neighborhood. He grew up in the crack era. He was raised by a single teenage Buddhist mother. And he says this about the racial unrest going on right now. I also, he says, am an American who, as an expat in a foreign country, I've been to dozens of countries in the world. And this is a black guy speaking now. And there are two things I know. One, black people in America are the freest and most prosperous black people in the world, period, bar none. And the second thing is this. People outside of America think that we are the most oppressed people in the world. It saddens me. It sickens me, the reputation that black people have, that somehow we are weak and impotent and that we can't do or be anything unless white people do it for us. So he's saying, look, there's something condescending in the way that Democrats approach the black race. You know, in the Brooks shooting in Atlanta, that was a case of mob justice. The mob demanded the scalp of a police officer, and the prosecutor, it's very unusual for a prosecutor to hand down an indictment with no investigation. And the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had not completed their investigation, and yet he indicted him, the cops there, for murder. You know, and legal people look at that and say, there's no chance they're going to be able to make that case. And here's a guy who stole a lethal weapon from a police officer and then used it on him, aggressively, physically, resisted arrest, and then fled arrest with a lethal weapon in his hands. Police just cannot let a guy do that. And by the way, 71% of the police in Washington, D.C., they are considering leaving. They're applying to other law enforcement agencies. They're considering early retirement. They're looking for another line of work, 71%. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap, and never forget, we're fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow, or Monday.